being on the show, and Suzanne, thank you. Dinesh, what has the United States gained by not taking out the mullahs that are responsible for all of the radical Islam fanaticism? Why not go after them directly? And second of all, why not put in satellites and antennas everywhere in Iraq and just flood them with the kind of liberal news that we have to deal with here? It sure did a good job brainwashing the people of America into electing the Democrats this time. Why not do that over there?
Okay, well, two things. First of all, I think we should go after the radical Muslims in a two-fisted way. Ironically, the people who are blocking us from doing that is the left at home. Now, why is that? If you talk to people, in a sense, on the left camp, what they say is, oh, we're fighting the wrong war. We shouldn't be fighting in Iraq. We should be going after the guys who did 9/11. Now, I don't know if this is news, but the guys who did 9/11, most of them are dead. Yes, we can have the planners of the operation and so on, but if the war on terror is defined so narrowly, what about the guys who did the London bombing, the Bali bombing, the Madrid bombing? What about the hundreds of thousands of people coming out of the madrasas imbued with hatred of America, signing up for jihad? Is that not part of the war on terror, the Taliban revival in Afghanistan? So yes, it's a bigger problem. Bush has made a lot of stupid mistakes. He's fighting, in a sense, on one front, the military front. He hasn't opened up the diplomatic front at all. But on the other hand, at least give him the credit that he recognizes it's a systemic problem. You have to change conditions on the ground over there. Now, you're asking, how do you do this? And in a sense, your strategy is the one we are adopting. You know, the United States is bankrolling all kinds of media operations in Iraq. We also fund dissident media in Iran. Most of the dissident radio stations, from what I read, are playing rock music and rap music. Now, I'm not totally against it. There are Iranian young people who don't like the mullahs and they like this kind of music. Okay. But remember, in the 60s and 70s, that's not how we fought the Soviet Union. We had Radio Free Europe, we had Radio Liberty, we had Soviet emigres giving, providing information on constitutionalism, on limited government, on property rights, on the right of dissent. In other words, it was a war of ideas. We didn't try to bring the Berlin Wall solely by sending off Madonna.
Is the media liberal?
The media is, the established media is overwhelmingly liberal, and the proof of this is that the conservatives have had to resort to what you can call rebel media. If you look at the Fox News channel, or you look at talk radio, in the sort of bomb-throwing conservative media, the conservatives excluded from the mainstream media have had to run in a way to some of the more outsider shooting in type of media. And I think it's been to the detriment of our political debate because the sort of high-level debate that we should be having is, in a sense, institutionally cut off. The same is true of the universities. Conservatives are excluded from the mainline universities. The kind of debate we've been having today, these kinds of arguments are often not heard on literally hundreds of American campuses. It's a very serious intellectual problem, quite apart whatever your political views.
I'm really enjoying this program, and I've enjoyed your books over the years, and I'd like to extend a conversation you and I had about 6 or 7 years ago, and that conversation had to do with what Ronald Reagan would do in a particular situation. What would, in your judgment, and this is obviously speculation, but how would Ronald Reagan react to the war on terror? How would Ronald Reagan perceive the weaknesses in radical Islam? What would he do to exploit those weaknesses that perhaps President Bush and the President administration is not doing?
I'm sorry, caller. Thank you.
I think a bunch of things. Much as I admire Bush, I do think that he has some very serious weaknesses. One is he's a bit like the toy soldier who walks into the wall and keeps going. If you ask Bush, gee, what would you do about Iraq with all the information you have now? He goes, well, I'd do it exactly the same way. I don't think Reagan would say that. I think what Reagan would say is something like this. In retrospect, I might concede that I was wrong to invade Iraq when I did. In retrospect, I kind of wish I'd focused, not invasion, but focused on Iran. Iran was pursuing the weapons of mass destruction with the same determination as Saddam Hussein, but apparently with greater success. But you have to remember that no president gets to make a decision in retrospect. A statesman is in the moving current of events, and a statesman has to make decisions with information available at the time. So I think this kind of open-minded attitude, which is, I didn't know these facts. I had to weigh competing risks. Yes, I had to look at what if I invaded Iraq and was wrong? But I had to weigh that against what if I did nothing and was wrong? What if the radical Muslims were able to get their hands on a big bomb and it went off in Chicago and 25,000 people were killed? Who would take the responsibility then? So that's the point. I wish Bush was more flexible. I think he's fighting too much a one-dimensional military campaign. He should be fighting on the diplomatic front, in a sense, to wean away the traditional Muslims to the radicals. In The Enemy at Home, I give 5 ways to do that. I think that opens up a totally new strategy in the war on terror.
Columbia, Maryland.
Oh, hello, Connie and Mr. Dinesh. I have a comment and 3 questions for you. Thanks to your darling Ronald Reagan, who deregulated the airlines and FDA, and they're all in a mess. Do you ever plan to go back to India to live? If not, why? And to what country do you owe your citizenship, or maybe citizenships? When do you plan to challenge or write about a form of slavery, the caste system in India? And thank you very much.
Number one, I do write about the caste system in my book, The End of Racism. You know, when I first came to Washington in the 80s, I looked around and I noticed a very interesting sight, which is that those of us who are, if you will, persons of color, non-white, we're often held to be experts basically on our own non-whiteness. So in other words, if you're black, you're asked your opinion on racism and the Rodney King beating and the O.J. Simpson verdict, but nobody cares what you think about the war on Iraq. And I didn't want to develop a career in America in which I would be Mr. Official Indian, giving the Indian viewpoint on everything. And so I said very prudently, I am not going to write about India at all, at least for a while. I'm going to develop an interest and expertise in other issues. And then in later life, once I have established that independence, I can always go back if I want and write about India, which I might still do. I am not, however, going to move back to India for this reason. Well, first of all, I've got my lovely wife, my beautiful daughter here. I have every reason to stay. I have very thoughtfully chosen American citizenship, not just foisted upon me. I didn't do it to get to work at the White House. I actually became a citizen after I left the White House. It was a deliberative decision to switch allegiances, and it's because I believe that America ultimately stands for the greatest idea in the world, which is the idea that belonging to a country is not simply a function of birth or blood. You could come to India, or you could come to India and live for 30 years. You could even take Indian citizenship, but you cannot become Indian. And the reason for this is that being Indian is a function of having brown skin and Indian parents. Similarly, you have immigrants going to Europe, the Pakistanis in England, the Turks in Germany, the Algerian Muslims in France. They cannot become French or become German or become English very easily, because in those countries too, membership is a function of blood and birth. The beauty of America is that people can come here from all over the world. At one time it was the Irish, the Italians, and the Jews. Today it may be the Pakistanis or the West Indians or the Koreans. And it sometimes takes a couple of generations, but we can all become American. We become American by embracing the American way of life, by embracing the pursuit of happiness, by embracing, if you will, the Constitution and its promise of a better life. So I believe in that promise. I want it very much for my family and succeeding generations. So, like it or not, I'm afraid I'm here to stay.